our personnel, our regional and local partners and beyond, and of course, our partners in policymaking, to do those protective actions for our personnel, our facilities, our rolling stock, to continue our continuity of government and adapt our levels of service to make sure that the city keeps moving. And with that, I will turn it over to Chief Nick LoCicero as our emergency manager to give you an update.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, City Council and public. I would like to provide you a brief summary of emergency management efforts as it's related to this COVID-19 response, as the Chief laid out initially. We continue to support the city in the following ways and means with reporting of issues related to COVID-19. Emergency management and the city EOC remains at a level 2 activation. That is a partial virtual activation. We continue to coordinate daily administrators and directors calls, providing communication and coordination platform for the City of Tampa-led actions. EM continues to publish daily situational briefs. We continue to vet resources and support requests for city departments while coordinating with internal and external city stakeholders. We continue to communicate and coordinate with other emergency management partners to assess their operational tempo, as those actions and current situation may impact the city. These community partners include, but are not limited to, the following: Tampa General Hospital, St. Joseph's Hospital, Tampa International Airport, Port Tampa Bay, Florida Aquarium, and Laurie Park Zoo. As reported by the state this morning, state cases for COVID leveled at 22,897 this morning, and Hillsborough cases settled at 873 for this morning's report. The City of Tampa emergency management goals: we continue to align with the senior priorities of leadership in response to COVID-19. We continue to respond to appropriate resource requests that are received, and we continue to communicate with our city departments and stakeholders to provide those needs. We proactively engage in a unified relationship with Hillsborough County Emergency Management through an integrated emergency management approach, and we continue to spread the message of personal responsibility, discipline with social distancing, and stay-at-home orders. Additionally, we, on a regular basis, almost daily, are in contact with the health department and those needs and assessments as they provide. We're constantly speaking with them. And that concludes my report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief LoCicero. Now I'm going to turn it over to our City Attorney, Gina Grimes, and Deputy City Attorney, Andrea Zelman. Ms. Grimes.
Good morning, council members. Gina Grimes, City Attorney. Since the last update last week, the most significant legal development involves the County Emergency Policy Group, of which the mayor is a member. I know you've heard by now that the Emergency Policy Group on Monday imposed a curfew from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. And this was a proposal that was made by Commissioner Miller, and it was intended to address some of the larger crowds that he had witnessed gathering in parts of the city and county. The way it was drafted, it allows the same activities and services during the curfew hours as allowed during the non-curfew hours. And so the issue has been raised about what is the intended purpose of the curfew, if it allows the same activities during curfew hours as it does during non-curfew hours. And that's an issue that's likely to be discussed further today at the 1:30 EPG meeting. The other issue that's likely to be discussed today at the EPG meeting is a face covering order. The proposal was first presented on Monday by Mayor Castor, And what we've learned is other jurisdictions have some form of face covering orders, Osceola County, Miami-Dade, Broward. And the orders that they have contemplate some form of face covering that people are going to be may be required to wear when either working in or visiting stores, pharmacies, when on transit, or in any other location when social distancing is not possible. And the definition of face covering is very broad. It includes a mask, a scarf, any item that would cover the mouth and the nose. It could be homemade, it could be store-bought, it can be sew or no sew. And the CDC has guidelines and instructions actually on how to make these face coverings. And there are the order that's been drafted and presented to the EPG has several exceptions for when face coverings are not required. There are situations where someone is under 2 years old, if they have a health condition that would be impaired by use of a face covering, or if they're not in a profession or job that involves face-to-face interaction, they likewise would not be required to wear a face covering. Also, there's an exception for first responders because their personal protection equipment is governed by their own individual agencies. And the reason that this is being proposed is the data supports face coverings as the next best measure to social distancing and preventing the spread of the disease. And when the day finally comes when social distancing measures are decreased and finally we can physically re-enter the work world, it's very likely that face coverings will be worn to continue to prevent the spread and to prevent the resurgence of COVID. So with that, that concludes my section of this, the legal update. But now I'm going to turn it over to Andrea Zelman. And we've all heard in the past week a lot about the city's One Tampa economic relief program, and it comes on the coattails of the federal legislation with economic recovery programs. And I think to just give everybody sort of a framework in which to understand all the various different programs that are out there, Andrea is going to address the programs that exist at the federal level, the state level, and then at the local level. And it's a very high level overview. We're not going to go into a lot of detail, but I thought it was important for you all when you deal with your constituents to have a good framework in which to explain to people what their various options are. So now I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, the Deputy City Attorney.
Good morning, everyone. Andrea Zelman here. And again, this is just a very brief overview. Each of the items that I'm going to mention have a significant amount of detail to them that we just don't have time to go into. But I do want to give you and the public this overview of, again, the financial relief programs that are available to date. And I would also note that the city's COVID-19 webpage has links to these programs, as well as some programs being done by non-governmental industry groups and nonprofits. So it's a great resource. So first, at the federal level, as many of you are probably aware, there have been 3 stimulus bills enacted so far. The very first one allocated significant money to respond to the pandemic, and that included a Small Business Administration loan program called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program for companies with 500 employees or less. And the first 10,000 of any of those loans does not have to be repaid. I believe that program has already been closed, but that was, again, one of the early economic relief programs. The second bill that Congress passed was the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. The significance of that for businesses was it created some new categories of temporary paid sick leave and family and medical leave for people who can't work as a result of various COVID issues. And again, this is for businesses with between 50 and 500 employees. And again, the significance is that with these additional leave categories, the companies are not going to be out of pocket. It's 100% reimbursable by the federal government. And then the third stimulus bill, if you will, is the one that probably has gotten the most attention, the CARES Act. And that's the one that for individuals and families, and again, this one applies only to tax filers. People with an income up to $75,000 got $1,200 from the federal government, and I know from anecdotal evidence that people who had a direct deposit relationship with the IRS have already gotten their money this week. Couples with an income up to $150,000 got $2,400 plus $500 per child. Even people who earn up to $99,000 individually and $198,000 total as a couple got money, although it was reduced somewhat from that $1,200, $2,400 amount. And then the CARES Act also had a program for small businesses, which you've probably heard about, the Small Business Paycheck Protection Program, which provided small business loans that were to be used to pay up to 8 weeks of payroll costs, mortgage, interest, rents, and utilities. This was also limited to businesses with 500 employees or less. The businesses have to apply for the loans through their local banks. The significance is that the loans will be forgiven by the federal government, so they basically are converted into a grant, provided the employer maintains or rehires employees and maintains salary levels for those employees. So it was both to help the business during these difficult times, but also to provide an incentive for them to keep people on the payroll. The other significant thing that the CARES Act did was give $150 billion with a B total to states and eligible local governments. From the CARES Act, Florida will receive a total of $8.3 billion, with the state getting $4.5 billion of those dollars, and the remainder being split among local governments. Now, the unfortunate thing for the city of Tampa is the bill limited it to governments, local units of government with a population of more than 500,000 people. So only one city in the entire state of Florida has that population, and that's Jacksonville, and only 12 of the 67 counties even have that population. Hillsborough is one of them, and according to the calculations done by the Florida League of Cities, using the Treasury Department's Florida formula, Hillsborough will receive over $256 million from this program. We do not know yet whether the city of Tampa will be able to obtain a share of either Hillsborough's funds or the state of Florida's funds. Obviously, that's something that will need to be addressed. But just to make you aware that that money is out there. And in addition, I can tell you, and you probably have seen this in some of your emails, that cities like us around the country are currently lobbying Congress to provide funds to governments such as ours with less than 500,000 people population in the fourth stimulus bill that is being negotiated now in Washington. Congresswoman Castor and others in the House have been asking for that to be included in the fourth stimulus bill. And she's also asked the state to ensure that Tampa and other local governments get a fair share of the total of the $4.5 billion that the state of Florida is getting. Of note is the fact that these funds cannot be used to directly account for a local government's revenue shortfalls that are due to COVID-19. It can only be used, the relief fund money can only be used to cover expenses that are necessary as a result of COVID and weren't already in the local government's budget. Then next, and so that sums up the federal relief programs. Again, there is a fourth stimulus bill being negotiated now, so stay tuned. The state of Florida had some programs as well. As you're all aware, they have what used to be called unemployment compensation. Now it's called reemployment assistance. Congress did increase the amount that's available. And of course, we've all heard the state has been having some logistical problems with those applications, but that is a state program that is trying to provide relief. There was also a Florida Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program. The state made $50 million total available with loans of up to $50,000 interest-free per business. That program closed the day it opened. So many businesses applied, and we have not yet heard whether they will add funds and allow more businesses to apply. I wasn't able to find any identified financial relief program at the county level yet. As you know, here at the city, we just introduced our One Tampa Relief Now Rise Together program, which I believe you've been briefed on. But again, for those in the public that may be hearing this for the first time, this program is intended again to kind of follow all these other larger relief programs I mentioned, but to provide more direct help at the local level. So provide direct payments for up to 1 month's rent or mortgage, plus utility costs, and the city will remit the payment directly to landlords, mortgagors, or to TICO on behalf of those people who qualify. For individuals and families, that's up to $1,000 for rent or mortgage payments, or up to $250 for utilities. For small businesses and specific industries, it's up to $4,000 for rents and mortgages, and up to $1,000 for utilities. Again, this is a pure grant program, does not need to be repaid. And again, it's intended to be a bridge for those most in need at our local level until they're able to obtain the larger state and federal funds that I've mentioned. So that concludes my presentation. Again, these are very detailed, and I do invite everyone to take advantage of the city's website, which has more detailed information about all these programs. Thank you.
Chair Vieira, sorry to interrupt. I just want to recognize that Councilmember Gudes should be on the line now.
Yes, thank you very much. Yep, our friend Councilman Gudes is here. Thank you. Continue, guys. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
All right, John Bennett, Chief of Staff. Thank you, Legal Department, for the update. And just as a reminder, the rest of staff, including Ms. Carole Post, will brief on the relief plan in detail as well. And we're going to try and accelerate some to make sure we have plenty of time for council questions. Chief Dugan.
Good morning. So far, we have had 109 employees cleared for work. We are currently monitoring 15 employees, and 8 of them are on quarantine still. We've had 2 officers test positive. You know, we have taken a very conservative and deliberate approach. Tiffany Klein, the occupational nurse with the Tampa Fire Rescue, has been incredible. I always joke that she's going to be TPD's Employee of the Year, because when you look at other departments across the nation that have really been wiped out, her deliberate approach has really been a lifesaver, literally, to us. You know, at times we've had to take an entire squad off the street because we thought we had a potential exposure, and through her sorting through everything, we were then able to put those people back on the street the very next day. So, I mean, hats off to her. We do receive some random calls of what people consider to be violations of the Safer at Home order, and those are always difficult to deal with. But I do want to stress to everyone that out of 400,000 citizens, the percentage of compliance that we have is absolutely outstanding, in my opinion. And I think a small few reports that we get of crowds gathering kind of gets all the good that's going on out there by our citizens can get lost in the shuffle. That's all I have for now, unless somebody has some questions.
Thank you, Chief Dugan. Now I'm going to go back to Chief LoCicero. of the Tampa Fire Rescue Department for the fire rescue brief.
Thank you, Chief. And Chief Dugan, thank you very much for your comments. We know what an asset she brings to the table, and it's a great opportunity for us to share that as well. So we're pleased to do so. Let me, Council, provide you with a little bit of an update briefly. We continue on an administrative level to ensure that the core services are met. We continue to meet on a regular basis, that those elements of EMS and fire response are being met on a daily basis. We are maintaining the 911 pre-screening questions to enhance detection of patients with flu-like symptoms or COVID-like symptoms. We have continued cessation of all public safety events to reduce the possibility of exposures. We are maintaining, through the program that the Chief Dugan mentioned, we have an enhanced sick call process for our personnel, and that has helped us tremendously. We are maintaining and continuing to provide direction for enhanced personal protective measures, again, facilitating social distancing, facility cleanliness, and apparatus cleanliness after calls. We continue to monitor critically calls for service. Overall, they're down, but I will tell you, as last reported to you, it is a steady trend. We're going on anywhere from 25 to 30 COVID-related calls, again, going back to the 911 pre-screening, a day. So that's about the number of those that are suspect that we need to look at very, very critically, but the numbers anywhere from 25 to 30 a day. We continue to monitor PPE requests for fire rescue personnel, and we are following diligently exposure control processes for our first responders. And I'm glad to say that there has been no increase. Last time I spoke with you, we had 2 that tested positive. That number remains the same. We have no other uniform personnel that test positive, so it remains at 2 people positive thus far. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief LoCicero. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ashley Bauman over Marketing and Communications for her update as it relates to the City of Tampa and the Joint Information Center with the county.
Good morning, everybody. As I did last week, I'm going to give these stats since February 27th. Since then, the City of Tampa's coverage of COVID-19 coronavirus has had 32,700 earned media clips, with a reach of 1.5 billion people across the country, with a total publicity value of $5.1 million. These platforms include, but are not limited to, TV, print, radio, and all have a strong positive sentiment. Marketing and Communications has been in constant communication with our regional partners to ensure not only streamlined communication with our residents, but the most up-to-date information as we receive incoming questions on all of our platforms. They include our website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Nextdoor, and TikTok. Our total COVID-related page views on our website to date, as of February 27th, are 810,294. We have a total on our social platforms of new followers of 20,221. That is with a grand total of 317,435 people following. Our reach on those platforms, that means people we can communicate with, is 8,950,797. We have put out a total of 86 COVID-related videos with a total of 52 COVID-related press releases, and have sent a total of 70 bilingual text messages to our Tampa Ready and Tampa Lisa. Beyond our traditional communications efforts, again, we've been hosting Facebook Lives every day, PSAs on iHeart stations, as well as a myriad of PSAs on all the Cox radio stations. We have worked with our professional sports teams to ensure the launch of One Tampa was robust, and our fundraising efforts continue to drive from there. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Bauman. Now I'm going to turn it over to our Administrator of Neighborhoods and Community Affairs, Ms. Ocea Wynn. Ocea?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I would like to report that since May 17th, the Recovery Call Center has been operational every day with the exception of Easter Sunday, this past Sunday. And to date, we have received and addressed over 1,700 calls. We currently have 33 call takers representing all departments within the city of Tampa. And starting at the last week and the beginning of this week, all of the call takers are working remotely from their homes or in a safe environment to practice the social distancing. The legislative aides, your aides, were trained on COVID-19 resources, and this was to assist any calls that they have from your constituents to make the process of information flow a lot more seamlessly. We will also be providing training and up-to-date information to your aides regarding the One Tampa Relief Now Rising Together initiatives. Again, this is to help them deal and assist their callers with directing them to us and to the website of where and how they can apply for the relief program. In addition to that, last week we continued our support and outreach to the faith-based leaders, providing information in terms of holding religious services during last week and going forward. And in support of that, we are providing and continuing to provide the technical support, the soft support for those faith-based leaders who have interest in streaming their worship services online on Facebook. So any type of support that we can provide with that, we will continue to do. I'm quite sure that you've seen around town the signage, the be safe and we're in this together. All of those signs that have been placed to provide encouragement. Well, that has been a project with our Arts and Cultural Affairs Department in collaboration with local artists. We will continue that and we'll start as of this week with additional messaging and signs being posted throughout the city of Tampa. Our Parks and Recreation staff is continuing to provide calls for support to check in on our senior citizen population. And again, I want to stress and reiterate that these are the seniors who have registered with our parks within our parks program at our local centers, our Parks and Rec centers. And then finally, our staff, there's been some talk about the face covering. Our staff, Parks and Rec staff, they are continuing to construct and make the face coverings, and we have used some of the senior citizens to volunteer in that effort as well. So that's all I have for now. If you have any questions, I will be available after everyone reports out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ocea. Now I'll turn it over to Ms. Carole Post, Administrator of Development and Economic Opportunity.
Good morning, everyone. I have two quick updates on a couple of items that have been referenced in the past. As we've discussed, the first is with respect to our construction site inspection program. If you recall, when the Safe at Home orders were forthcoming from the county and then subsequently the state, infrastructure and construction were deemed an essential service, and so they have continued. At that time, we took the proactive approach to initiate a program whereby we would have an additional layer of protection garnered through a occupational safety inspection program for our 50 largest construction projects. The inspections started on April 9th, last Thursday, midday, and since that time, we've completed about 77 inspections. We do about 15 a day at these large sites. We've visited all 50 sites at least once, and about 15 we have visited more than once. We're generally seeing compliance. We're seeing increased attention to separation, sanitizing, and other protective measures. Where there are gaps in those protections, we think these occupational visits are helping to heighten awareness and visibility and bring about more positive outcomes. So I'm happy to take questions on that program as we progress. The other program, which you've heard a good deal about already, is our One Tampa relief effort. The mayor announced it on Tuesday. You know that it has a relief component and a philanthropic component. I won't go into the details. Andrea did a very nice job explaining some of the background of the nature of the relief, but just to update this group that the information about both the relief program and the philanthropic program is currently available online right now and through our hotline to ensure that individuals can understand what the program is and whether they can be eligible for it. And the application process will start on tomorrow, Friday, on April 17th at noon for individuals to apply. The business applications will go live on Tuesday, April 21st at noon. Both of those will be done or have the function available through an online tool, as well as to provide assistance through our 211 dial 7 partnership with the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay. So people have a couple of different paths in how to complete the applications. I'd like to just remind and emphasize the council that the relief plan is targeted at the most vulnerable of our community, and it's intended to cover those essential needs and primarily to be a bridge before the federal or other state funds will arrive and actually land in people's mailboxes. And then lastly, that the majority of the relief funds that we are relying on for the program today are federal CDBG funds, and therefore there are a number of required eligibility criteria that apply. So we'll be ready to work with our community and our partners at the Crisis Center as well as the Chamber to make sure that individuals and businesses have the help they need to complete the applications and get through the process and get these funds out to them as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Carole. We have two more quick briefings. First one's coming from our Administrator of Infrastructure and Mobility, Ms. Jean Duncan.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just wanted to let you know that our various infrastructure and mobility departments continue to be out providing the core services that our citizens need and expect. We are applying those protocols that you heard about from Chief Dugan and Chief LoCicero to ensure that all of our teams are safe and they're protected on the job, and also the public is protected as our workers are out doing their jobs. In addition, we specifically are supporting the testing efforts that have been occurring at Raymond James Stadium. We've had a pretty consistent flow of testers coming in every day. And just today, several other locations for testing were stood up. The most interesting for our council is the one at Lee Davis on 22nd Street in the East Tampa area. So that will offer testing in that particular area of town to make it a little more convenient for folks that are wanting to be tested. And we'll continue to support that operation with the county and with TPD as well as long as it continues to go on. Other than that, we're continuing to work in parallel with Ocea's efforts to put social distancing and encouraging messages on our sidewalks as folks are out bicycling and walking, to keep reminding about the social distancing requirements to keep them safe. And that's my report for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Next is our Chief Financial Officer, Dennis Rogero, to talk about fiscal responsibility as one of our strategic approaches through the COVID-19 process. Dennis.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Council. The mayor and leadership continue to scrutinize expenditures with an eye primarily on two things. Number one, the strength of the revenue source for those expenditures, and number two, what's critical for our operations, especially as we've discussed in the past, as those operations relate to parks and recreation, public safety, and public works. As we've also discussed, having half a fiscal year under our belts and a full month of emergency-related activity, we're incorporating this information into how we proceed this fiscal year and how we prepare our fiscal year 2021 budget. Again, one of our primary financial risks remains our revenues. And as you heard earlier, the mayor's team continues to pursue clarification on just how much federal relief we can expect to make up for those losses. That relief could be a real game changer. We continue to dialogue with the state, professional associations, and other localities. But of course, every locality, while sharing many common traits, is unique in terms of the types and levels of revenues it relies on, the level and quality of services it provides, and or the industries it supports and is in turn supported by. So in short, there remains a great deal of uncertainty out there nationwide for localities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. And as a quick wrap up, Chairman, Council, and public, just a couple quick reminders. As Ms. Grimes mentioned, there is an EPG, an emergency policy group meeting today at 1:30. So we encourage the public to tune into the county's meeting on that through their website or through their respective TV channel. And they will get an update from Dr. Holt over the Department of Health of some of the data and hope as we try to continue to flatten the curve in the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County and in the region. And just a point that Chief LoCicero mentioned about face coverings as it relates to personal protection equipment for our public safety. Just know that our personnel, non-public safety personnel, are also benefiting from 2 orders of face coverings. One that a shipment just came in of 4,800, and we're expecting another shipment of 4,800, which will serve all of our personnel with washable face coverings as we continue to battle this curve going into its midpoint, which is predicted for either the very end of this month or the beginning of May. And again, you can get that specific information by tuning into the EPG meeting later today at 1:30 from Dr. Holt. With that, I'll turn it back to the chairman and council for any questions of our staff.
Thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate that. Now, for that EPG meeting, sir, when do you need to be out of here by?
Staff is preparing for that to be online at 1:30 live. So typically, we're gearing up at least 30 minutes before that.
Okay. So may we have 30 minutes, 25 minutes of questions? Is that good?
Absolutely. Staff is poised to answer.
Time-wise? Okay, good. Great. Okay. So I'll give, let me ask council members so everybody can get as much time. Is there anybody who doesn't have more than 1 minute of questions or comments? Anybody? And I'll raise my hand for that. You never know what happens, but I have 1 or 2 minutes. Anybody else who feels like they're going to go 1 minute?
Guido Maniscalco, I can keep it short, so.
Thank you, Councilman Maniscalco. Okay, so that's 5
Tony Miranda, I can keep it short.
Thank you, Councilman Miranda. So that's 4.
Mr. Chair?
Let me do some quick math here. Yes, sir.
I hate to
Councilman
apologize.
Dingfelder,
I
go
will
ahead,
keep.
sir. Oh, and Citro, I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
I will keep mine very, very short.
Okay, so that's, I just want to give people as much time as possible. Okay, so let's do this. Let's give about 6 minutes to Councilman Gudes, Carlson, and Dingfelder, and then the rest of us will take 1 to 2 minutes, and that should do it. So we will go in alphabetical order, starting with Councilman Carlson. You may go, sir. 6 minutes.
My questions are short, but I don't know how long the answers will be. We're on the front line of getting lots of feedback from the public, and the biggest avalanche of comments I've been getting have been around the curfew, and then also the EPG's proposed face mask requirement today. And there are lots of different political comments about all of that, but as I remember the chief saying a few minutes ago, there aren't that many groups that are congregating illegally. And I remember originally when the EPG talked about curfew versus just the safer at home policy, that there weren't a lot of differences, and it sounds like legal is still trying to deal with that. But from a policy and protection point of view, can anybody comment on why it's essential that we add that extra layer in there that seems to be confusing by the public, and many people in the public are against? And then same thing with the masks. And in particular, I think the objection is the criminal penalties that come with breaking that.
John Bennett, Chief of Staff. Gina Grimes, do you want to take the legal aspect first?
Ms. Grimes, you there? Gina? Chief Bennett, you there?
Yeah, Chairman, I'll talk about the spirit of it, and if we can get our legal department to augment that based on the last EPG meeting, we'll bring them back in. I just want to mention in the spirit of it, the leadership, specifically from the city of Tampa, was geared around supporting a curfew only if it was going to give those on the front lines the additional ability to support the safer at home model based on crowds. It was put out there as an enhancer as opposed to just a simple addition to the safer at home model to give law enforcement the potential tool and also give parents an opportunity to have some conversations for education and policy to bring some of the youth that may have been staying out later to come in and avoid possible contamination or getting the virus and then bringing it into the home front. So that was the spirit of it. It wasn't designed and to be just another layer of enforcement, but an add-on not to make it more complex, but to give more tools to parents and to our law enforcement community to help keep the crowds minimized as much as possible. And I think you'll hear some dialogue as it relates to that from the EPG again at 1:30 today. As it relates to the masks, what has been seen and reported as we approach this curve, which again is the ultimate goal of reducing the spread of the coronavirus, is that a lot of times the essential services that are still authorized put people in close proximity to each other, not so much intentionally, but just passing each other in the grocery aisle or picking up the cart to go into the store or going to the pharmacy. And some of the communities, whether it's worldwide or in the United States that have done very well, have encouraged the mask wearing. Again, nobody wants to move into a penalty phase or an arrest phase, but our goal is to flatten that curve. And I will tell you that being one of the 7 urbanized counties with one of the major cities in Florida, and I think Chief LoCicero would support this as well, and listening to our public health doctors, that we're doing well, and we need to continue to do well as we approach this peak, both in supplies and protecting our hospital beds for the most critically sick. And this is one of those opportunities to do that. Most of the masks that are going to be worn, the face coverings, are designed just to protect the individual from their droplets as opposed to protecting anything incoming. So the more that we do as we approach this peak, the community, the county, of course, and the city will stay below that curve that we're all trying to compete with. And I'll see if legal wants to augment my response.
I'll just go ahead and say, listening to the public, you all have to do what makes sense to protect the public. But if we're accomplishing the goal through encouraging people, then I would encourage you all, as you're giving feedback to the EPG, to look at civil rights and human rights and other issues that people are concerned about in relation to taking it to the next level. We have to hit the goal, but there has to be a balance there about how far we can go. And then shifting gears a lot to the One Tampa proposal or program. One is I hope that we will get, City Council will get a full briefing on that at some point. I guess that will come up in the CRA meeting next week, but I was a bit disappointed. I don't know if my colleagues got a full briefing on it, but I found out about it, some of the details about it by watching the press conference, and then from Chambers of Commerce and other people who were briefed on it. But it sounds like there was a lot of briefing done in the days leading up to it, but I don't think that council was briefed on it. And we're getting a lot of questions about it. And one of the biggest questions I get, I was just on the phone with Kelly from the South Tampa Chamber, and she was on the phone with the West Shore Alliance. But one of the concerns is that it geographically partitions off big sections of the city. And so the question is, does it include the whole city or just certain parts? And I'll just say this before the answer comes. People have a perception that South Tampa is all multi-million-dollar homes and very wealthy people, but there are a lot of families that have been living in South Tampa for generations, and they might have bought a home from land development for $10,000 or $12,000 years ago, and they have a small business that where they're going paycheck to paycheck. There are lots of small businesses that aren't very wealthy, and there are lots of people that have been living here for a long time that aren't that wealthy. And I just have concerns about if we have economic criteria, that's fine, but if we have geographic criteria for no reason, there are a lot of concerns from constituents coming about that.
Mr. Carlson.
And this is and if I may, this is Louis Vieira. You're at 6 minutes. I'll give you about another minute, but so just go ahead.
And I'm done.
Hey, Mr. Carlson, this is Gina Grimes. I gave a really good answer to both of your questions, but apparently I got cut off. So I don't know if you heard any part of what I responded to as far as your questions on the curfew or on the
No, I didn't hear any of it. Sorry. No, we didn't hear any of it.
Did you want me to respond?
I'll leave that up to the chair.
Yeah, Ms. Grimes, if you could do that within a minute, that would be great.
Okay, I'll give it a try. On the face covering proposal, the reason it was proposed is because it is considered, as I mentioned, the next best mitigation measure in addition to social distancing. But the reason it's effective is because it gives you that measure of protection when social distancing is not possible. So we have social distancing, and that's adequate, and that's working. But in addition to that, we're going to have to do something else. And when we get to the point where we're all going back into the work world and we're no longer able to institute social distancing, we'll have to have some other protective measure to prevent the resurgence of COVID-19. So right now, it's intended to work in those instances when social distancing isn't possible. And as far as the curfew, the topic of the curfew, that was something that came up. It wasn't expected to be raised at that meeting, but it was brought up by Chairman Miller. And I think that what's going to be discussed today is what purpose does the curfew serve if the exceptions during the curfew hours are the same as those during the non-curfew hours. It's unclear what purpose is served, and I think that's what will be discussed today.
Thank you very much. Councilman Carlson, did you have a brief comment in response, sir?
No, thank you. I think that's the public has the same confusion. But is there an answer to the other question, or you want to move on to the next person?
What was the other question?
Let's, for the sake of time, for the sake of time, I hate to do this. Let's move on if we may. I want to make sure that every council member gets sufficient time, and we can, if we have a minute, we can go back to that. So my apologies for that. Let's go next to Councilman Citro. You had a brief comment, sir.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll tell you what. Councilman Carlson had a good question. Why don't I let Gina Grimes answer that? And I just want to say thank you all for this great report.
Okay.
And I'll if at the end I have an additional question, but let's have Ms. Grimes answer Councilman Carlson's question. Thank you, Chair.
Very gentlemanly of you. He yields you your time. Go ahead, Ms. Grimes.
Mr. Carlson, could you repeat the question, please? The third question.
About the one Tampa program. First part of it is I hope that at some point the city council will get a full briefing, like it sounds like the chambers and other groups got. And then number two, there's confusion about whether there is geographic partitioning. So the chambers that are outside of the CRA areas believe that, like South Tampa, believe that South Tampa is not included, and the West Shore area, I think, believes that they're not included. Is that correct, or are they?
That's correct.
Interject?
Go ahead, Carole. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. This is Carole Post. Councilman Carlson, I can be responsive to that with respect to the coverage for the program. As you know, there are two components to it. There's an individual component and there is a business component. For individuals, that is the eligibility covers the entire city. There is no geographical limitation for individuals. There's an income limitation and a few other criteria that apply, but there's no geographical limitation. For the businesses, there is a geographical limitation, and as I alluded to, the use of CBGB funds, the federal funds, impose a restrictive criteria, and that is geographical, and it is driven by the low income census tracts. And so, unfortunately, while, you know, again, the nature of wanting to make this aid available to the most vulnerable members of our community is somewhat driving some of the limitations that are there. We would very much like to have this be available to everyone at every aspect of the city, but it simply isn't feasible at this time.
And
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think there are.
Go for it.
There are disadvantaged people in South Tampa and disadvantaged people in the West Shore area, and you and I can talk about this offline. But I think it would be worth you all reaching out, maybe the West Shore Alliance and South Tampa Chamber and others to see if there's some other kind of program. It's not to try to affect everybody in every business, but to the extent that there are disadvantaged communities in other geographic parts of the city.
And Councilman, I'm going to have to stop you there because I don't want to take away time from our colleagues. Let me go next, if I may, to Councilman Dingfelder. 6 minutes. Go, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to staff. Hello to council. A couple of quick questions. Chief Dugan, there was a quick reference to enforcement. Let's assume they do the face covering order today, and they already have the curfew in effect. Talk to us about enforcement. I've had emails of people with great civil liberties concern, as Councilman Carlson said, about the curfew, et cetera. So talk to us about enforcement and that sort of thing. And then I have one or two others, Mr. Chair.
You know, what we're relying on is education and warnings. As you are well aware, the Constitution is still in effect, even though we're under a state of an emergency. You know, we're being very careful. And I think the issue is we have some people who think there may be violations. There are some perceptions of violations. And what we have done is just taken the approach that we're going to educate and warn people. You know, we really have not had any real problems with people. Once we talk to them and educate them, they move along and do the right thing. And we've taken a very reasonable approach. And I think that's why we haven't had any arrests, we haven't had any problems, and we have no intentions of making an arrest unless we absolutely have to. But, you know, we're doing our best, and I think it's really working well when you look at the big picture of everything.
Okay, and speaking of arrests, I know we emptied out the jails a little bit in regard to low-level nonviolent criminals and that sort of thing. Are we also trying to ease off on arrests for similar misdemeanors and low-level felonies, just to keep the jails, you know, at a low population?
Well, I wouldn't say that we're laying off arrests. What I would say is we are looking at giving notice to appear, or, you know, I think what I say is the Hillsborough County Jail is open for business, and if you commit a crime, you're potentially going to go to jail. But what we're doing is doing our best to use the notice to appear. You know, crime is down, our calls for service is down, you know, overall. But we're using a notice to appear if we have to. But, you know, if they commit a felony, they're going to end up going to jail. But it really has not become much of an issue.
Okay, thank you, Chief. In regard to the One Tampa project, and I applaud the mayor for stepping up and trying to help our community with the limited resources that the city has. Dennis Rogero, our finance director, can you talk about a little more detail about the sources of the money for that program? And then I have one follow-up after that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, sir. This is Dennis. Yeah, the Tampa One Fund is going to be primarily made up of federal funding in the form of community development block grants from HUD to the tune of $2 million, a philanthropical component that we hope to get to $2 million, a match from the city's emergency reserve fund for $2 million, and then an as yet determined amount from the Community Redevelopment Agency board that I believe the administration is going to bring to you next week. If we can get to a $2 million figure there, we'd have a total of $8 million for the Tampa One Fund.
Okay. And that sounds great. Obviously, as the CRA, we'll discuss our component or potential component of that. I will chime in and agree with Councilman Carlson. There are small business people who have one little dry cleaning shop in a strip center, anywhere in town, South Tampa or anywhere else. And they might be, and they probably are suffering economically the same as anybody else. So, Ms. Post, I'm not even looking for a response, but I would urge you and the mayor and Chief Bennett to put your heads together. The reserve fund was generated by taxpayers' dollars, and everybody contributes. So everybody should be able to benefit. So I think we need to expand our business program to, I understand the limitations on the CDBG money and obviously on the CRA money in relation to the geographic. But if we're using taxpayer money in regard from the reserves, then I think that the program needs to be opened up potentially geographically to all businesses, no matter where they are. And I agree with Councilman Carlson, that should be more of an economic criteria than a geographic criteria. That's all I got. Thanks for all y'all are doing, and I'll talk to y'all later.
Thank you, Councilman Dingfelder. Appreciate it, sir. Councilman Gudes, sir, you have 6 minutes. Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first apologize to the citizens about this morning. Several phone calls about the inadequacy of City Council operating. It's time for us to get to work, and the community is asking that we're not giving them what we need to be giving them. We're frontline essential people. We're elected by the people to work, and we have to be on the front lines just like everybody else. Maybe I have that old police mentality because I've served the front lines, but I want council to understand we've got to get back to work. But as it relates to the One Tampa, I do agree with Councilman Dingfelder and Mr. Carlson. If you're saying a One Tampa, that means, and we're going reserve funds, that means all the small businesses should be included. When we talk about CBG funds, some of those are federal guidelines. We got to make sure we follow those. I understand that. I don't know why we're jumping in the CRA talk with the One Tampa reference to, we have not even met with our director in reference to a policy in reference to what we can do to help out our small businesses communities. So I'm kind of confused about that. I'm also kind of confused how does everyone else know about One Tampa? And this council doesn't know any criteria until the 9th hour is laid out. That's unacceptable. Where I get called and I can't answer legitimate questions to the public, my constituents, about the One Tampa program. I've already really expressed my disgust with Ms. Post and the Chief of Staff. I do like some of the things in the individual portion of the One Tampa, but I do not like a lot of the portions in the small business program. I don't know, and Ms. Post can tell me, because people are asking me, I don't know what a 1099 contract is, or sole proprietor consultant, not cash or tax means. So maybe you can explain what that means so the public can know, because I don't know what that means.
Councilman Gudes, I appreciate it. And in continued response to that, we agree, and we would very much desire to have this be more expansive. We are working with the resources we have now, as discussed. If we are able to raise more philanthropic funds, tap into, with the discretion of the CRA board, some of the CRA interest funds, those would be essentially unrestricted. The CRA funds would be restricted to those geographical locations, but philanthropic dollars would be unrestricted. That would open doors for us to really expand the program in many ways. So we look forward to that. We're in response to your specific question. As we've discussed, the attachment around critically impacted businesses, we're refining that as we speak. That's some of why we launched this a few days before the applications go live, is to make sure that these things make sense, that people understand whether they're eligible or not before the clock starts running. So we will have some more defined answers to that and have that document updated before noon tomorrow to answer your question. Thank you.
I'm kind of confused about the 50% reduction in revenue. Because if a person is making $3,000 a month, will make $3,000 a month, and now they're making 18, they would technically be are not qualified for the program. And a lot of the other programs that you, Ms. Zelman, have mentioned have closed. People cannot get those grants or loans because they don't understand, don't have the proper documents, or they just can't apply. Many of my friends who apply for your paycheck protection programs, the economic disaster loans, you know, the ones who have applied, they've been already people who have money. I have small business owners who receive funds who are millionaires already, but the small guy is still left out. I have to make sure that when I look at criteria of 5 years, I look at code enforcement violations, I look at some of these other stipulations that are in there. You're going to cut the small person out. You're going to cut Ms. Jones out, but she may not be able to come up with a lot of these things. But we know Ms. Jones has been operating for maybe over 5 years, maybe 3 years. She's been strong. It takes a business 3 years to peak, and 5 years get them where they need to be. I'm a business owner of my family. I understand that. So I think, like I explained to you in the chief, we rolled this out, and I applaud the mayor for the efforts of getting something moving, but we pulled it out too fast. Council has no idea what is going on with this, and I applaud again the mayor and whoever staff was to create some of the stuff, but there was no input from this council, but we had input from all these other people at the table, and we can't answer questions. And that's bad for a council. To me, when people say do nothing council, I have to sit back and shake my head. Well, hell, you're right. So I'm looking forward, Mr. Chairman. Again, I know that you don't want motions, but we are going to have to eventually take up a position of when council will get back to work. You know, I look at Chief Bennett, great guy. You know, he was a guy who was a commander of a SWAT team. When he needed things and they were not right, he got it done. What I'm saying, we have technology. We have a city government that's saying we don't have the ample technology. So we got to get that technology so we can operate, sir. I've got Mr. Mantego of the LoCicero sending me a letter saying that he can provide a place for this council to meet and for our constituents to meet to get back to work. I see the email with all the council members I've CC'd on. I'm hoping later on, after the other staff left, that we can have a discussion about getting back to work and getting the technology we need to do what we got to do. It's really upsetting to me, but I want to make sure if Ms. Van Loan is on this line, I want to make sure she knows that she has a contract. We have a contract with the city. She works for the CRA board, and her policy should not mirror the One Tampa policy. And I had several state representatives have called me as it relates to CRA dollars and say, you need to be careful of this. So I want to make sure, put that in the air, and that people know. I don't like to hide anything, but these are some of my concerns. I'll yield back, sir, and I hope we can have a discussion about us getting back to work.
Anything else, Councilman?
That'll be fine. That'll be all, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilman. Next we'll move to Councilman, let's see here, Maniscalco.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to my colleagues for your comments and questions. A lot has been said. You know, I've received questions, some complaints, and I know it's not our vote, it's the emergency policy group vote regarding the curfew. Some people think it's unnecessary. because, businesses, a lot of places, supermarkets, everything from Save-A-Lot, Publix, Dollar Tree, whatever is considered essential, they're closing at 8, 9 o'clock. So where are people going to go after the curfew time? So that's, one concern. Folks are worried about that, but Chief Dugan has already answered some questions regarding that. People are in compliance. If they're stopped, they move along. They understand. We're avoiding issues with that. The issues with the face mask. I wear my mask when I go out if I have to go out. But what I see when I do go out, a lot of people are already wearing the mask, which is good. People are social distancing. I really don't see too many people. There's traffic is pretty light for the most part everywhere. But yesterday I took a walk through the city, and I photographed, just how much less traffic there is, and I appreciate that people are complying with that. I know that this is a strange time. This is a very difficult time, but we're trying to, and everybody from the mayor down to us to members on the EPG group, whatever, we're trying to get to that, flattening that curve, getting to the plateau, and getting this done as quickly as possible. I think the social distancing is working. We're seeing the numbers improve in favor of us getting out of this and us getting back to work and putting this behind us as quickly as possible. I appreciate this fund to help some business owners, should they meet the qualifications, being 5 years in business and only in certain areas and whatnot. It's helping a certain group of people. I know we have to abide by guidelines that are beyond, just what we can impose through the city because of funding and whatnot. I hope that we can look at expanding that and whatnot and helping people throughout the entire city, because this is very, this is very hurtful to the small business owner. People are losing money day in and day out. I talk to people daily, and each day I have somebody that I know that said I've been furloughed or I've been laid off. People are scared. People have only so much in savings. I know some folks are getting the stimulus, which is appreciated. How long will this last? We don't know. How long will this hold them over? I don't know. People are very scared, but I think we're doing the best that we can in trying to maneuver through these waters that we don't know. Everything is changing daily, but I think we're making improvements and whatnot. So that's it. That's all I have to say. I appreciate it, and on to the next person.
Thank you very much, Councilman Maniscalco. We appreciate it, sir. Councilman Maniscalco. Or I'm sorry, Miranda, excuse me.
Yeah, I just want to say
Councilman
that both
Miranda,
are
you
with
there?
them, so
Oh, yes, sir.
yeah, I'm here. M&M, Miranda
Thank you,
Maniscalco was the same thing. I just want to say thank you to all the council members for the concern, the administration for making some bold moves and explaining what they've done. This is a time in history that whatever we do or whatever we do not do will be recorded in history forever. And this country, not only the city of Tampa, but this whole country is facing a battle that they're not used to. We used to have all the freedom to do what we wanted. We still have that, but they have to be under the emergency statute now. If we continue to do what we're doing, and no law or no emergency measure is accepted unless the public follows you. And I want to say thank you to the public for doing exactly what is necessary to clean up this COVID-19 and get us back to where we were sometime in the future. Notice I didn't say a date, because in my mind, all of us have been looking for a figure to lead. And if you think that this is by May 1st, this is going to be solved, or June 1st or July 1st, in my opinion, it won't be until next year. I hope I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. When people want to do things and people want to follow, that's one thing. But when the people are following and the leaders are saying another thing, that we're going to open in such and such a date and do whatever, it's going to be chaotic. Because if this virus comes back again, as it's been going now, and you're still having deaths like in New York, over 700 a day. And talking about deaths, how many, I know the Chief Dugan explained one city department. I'd like to have a report in the next 2 weeks or so from the administration, if they know how many city employees we've had sick with the virus and how many, if any, have succumbed to that disease. something we haven't talked about. And God bless us for what we're trying to do and solve something that's invisible. It's stronger than the atomic bomb because you can't see it coming, and it'll kill you just as deadly as the atomic bomb. So I want to thank all of you for doing what you're doing, and just take a step back, take a breath of fresh air, and look around and says, thank God that we live in this country. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councilman Miranda. We appreciate that. In closing, I just got some brief comments here. A lot of folks have opined on the curfew. I think it's a good message on modification. Oh, I think it's a very good message on modification that we continually see here on this curfew issue. We're in a time of crisis, and we're asking a lot of our citizens and residents. We're asking a lot for a special purpose, which is public safety, the welfare of the vulnerable. The vast majority, I think, of our residents, from what I see, support this. I've been a strong supporter of this, even with sacrifices that have been requested, frankly, because it's the right thing to do and it saves lives. The curfew has not been met with such a great welcome. My view is simple. If there are people who are being grossly irresponsible and having huge outside parties that engage issues of public safety, address that. Don't go after the guy walking his dog. Don't go after the solitary person on the stroll at 9:20. Don't go after the guy with munchies who's ordering Hungry Howie's pizza at 9:30. This was clearly well meant. I think there is a consensus that initially there was some overreach by the EPG. This administration has been leading often against the wind, especially at the beginning, against the wind on COVID-19. They have my strong support. But I think this move by the EPG muddled a strong message that we should continually have, I think, on public safety. On Councilman Carlson's point, I agree. I brought this up with the administration. While CRA gives us a really good, unique, special tool, it's a narrowly tailored one. It should be one of the tools in our toolbox, and a toolbox for an entire city that's hurting. South Tampa's hurting, North Tampa's hurting, East and West Tampa are hurting, Ybor, Channelside, New Tampa, College Hill, everywhere. And we should certainly have remedies for I think, for every situation. And then lastly, and I hear a lot about us, getting back to work. I want to draw a distinction because I think every single member here on this city council is working very hard. We're not having the technological support that we need, and I discussed that at the beginning, to have these meetings. But every single staff member is working hard. Every city council is working their tail off. Where our meetings are not technologically we want them to be, for the reasons I said in the beginning, I suggest we're all working hard. I myself, I'm on my third town hall. My legislative assistant, Brandon Jordan Lazo, has been frankly working her tail off with me on constituent matters, meetings, chair issues, technological challenges, et cetera. So I just want to say my piece, which is we want to get back to meetings. We want to get back to council being able to do our formal meetings and our job within the city within feasibility. But I think all of us are very, very much so working hard. And I just wanted to state that. Very briefly here, I'm going to suggest in closing that we call for a special call meeting on Tuesday, April 21st, for this very purpose, in fact, from 9 to 10:30 to come to a consensus on future council meeting schedules, including, because it's that time of year, the election of a council chair and quasi-judicial hearings. We need to continue to push this issue of having proper hearings, proper meetings, so we can move the economy forward and move the people's business forward. So therefore, I am calling for a special call meeting on April 21st from 9 to 10:30 to come to a consensus on these issues, and also to address the issue of election of council chair, vice chair, CRA chair, and CRA vice chair, as we have to do that. And I think everybody's heard of this, but we'll go from there. Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes.
Mr. Chairman, point of order, Dingfelder. Listen, and I said this about a week or two ago. I think we limit ourselves on the back end of these meetings, an hour meeting, an hour and a half meeting, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we find ourselves having to rush. I think we should do a special call meeting for 3 hours, and if we use up an hour and we hang up, then we're done. But when we limit ourselves to an hour and a half, I think it creates problems. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Your point is well taken. I'll add some more time to that. And today Councilman Dingfelder is a very good example of that because council members, everybody had very good points, and I had to unfortunately cut everybody off. So your point is well taken, so I'll add some more to that. So point well taken.
Mr. Chair.
Did anybody else have a closing comment? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Carlson. I sent around a memo about the 23rd. There's the expectation of the community that we would have that workshop regarding Bayshore and speeding throughout the city, and it has become more and more of an issue, not just because of the tragedy recently, following a tragedy in January and the one a couple years ago, but now there's still speeding complaints throughout the city, and I feel strongly that we should go ahead and do this while the public has time. We should take all the input that we can. The chief of staff has suggested maybe moving it to the 30th, but we need time to be able to inform the public about the meeting, and I think we ought to do that broadly so that we get as many people out as possible, so that we hopefully can address this once in 4 or 8 years instead of regularly, and also provide the safest solutions we can for our citizens.
Yes, sir, Councilman, and I support that. We're working with staff. I know on the 23rd, we're going to have I believe it is a CRA meeting that day, if memory serves me right, a briefing. So I believe we are, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but we're working on one of those 2 dates. So that will happen, sir. And I saw your memo, and I'm fully supportive on a workshop on speeding throughout the city, including Bayshore and throughout all of the city of Tampa. So thank you for your comments and input on that, Councilman Carlson. That is going to happen. So thank you for that, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, everybody, very much. Tampa City Council is adjourned. Thank you to all of our council members for all of your hard work and inputting your passion. And thank you to all staff members, including Chief Bennett and everyone, for all of your hard work and dedication. Thank you, everybody, very much. God bless you and stay safe. Thank you.